Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and I have something a really special topic for you today. My guest is a lady that was on once before, and her name is Jill Matson. She is a musician, an author, an artist, and some other things that I can't remember at the moment. But thank you for coming on, Jill.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you have really done a lot of studying. So it's really nice to have you on because you know so many things that people have never heard of before. So we're going to talk about things that were going on in ancient Egypt today. Now, the first question I'll start out with is, why are people instinctively drawn to ancient Egypt?
Well, if you just imagine that they existed as a world power for 3,000 years. Now, we in the United States have been a world power for what, 100 maybe? Plus or minus a little?
No, it's over, well, that depends. Are you talking about before or after the Civil War?
But, so it's 100 or 200, doesn't matter.
But it hasn't been all that long, really,
No.
compared to other places.
In 3,000 years, they're a world power, and they have wealth, they have abundance, they have splendor, they have pyramids that we still are not sure how to do. They, mummies was a total secret on how to do that, save a few years ago. They had a fascination and a desire to learn about the stars and longevity, afterlife, and they credited the power of their nation, not with their armies, not with the stock market, with spiritual prowessness, with spiritual knowledge. And I just think that that draws us, even if we're not conscious of it, that draws us. Edgar Cayce, the famous prophet,
I'm a fan of his.
I love his stuff too. He writes hundreds and hundreds of essays on people who have past lives in ancient Egypt, talking about people being in the priesthood. And think of it, the cream of the crop are priests, magicians, and physicians in their temple complex. So that's the top of the food chain in ancient Egypt. It's spiritual mastery.
Yeah, if you read books on gemstones, if you're reading about a certain gemstone, some of them will say that it was included in the breastplate of the priests and the head honchos or whatever you call them, you know.
For their frequency and their energy, and we'll get into that in more detail. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think that mankind or people, we have a collective unconscious. And it's like when a certain amount of the population knows something, we all know something, we take it for granted, we accept it. I believe that we have a collective unconscious that we somehow know that there's a lot to be gained by understanding the secrets in ancient Egypt, and we haven't really even unearthed anything. What were they doing for 3,000 years with the cream of the crop of the whole world, studying all day long in huge amounts of temples? What were they doing? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to suggest to you and give you examples that stuff that when I was a little kid we thought was superstitious, and I know when I first read it, I'm embarrassed that I was so judgmental, but I thought, wow, these people smoking. When I was reading those papyri, it's like, these are crazy people. Until I started to study physics And I'm quite the geek, and I've read many physics books. I love it. And I've also studied the music and the metaphysical inner circles of ancient China, Samaria, Egypt, the Hindus, Greece. And by revealing their understandings and their secrets of all of these ancient communities, it helps me understand any one better. In other words, China might be very clear about certain secrets, and then I can see them clearly going on in Egypt. So I've been able to put together the pieces of just what were they doing and how can that benefit us today.
Okay, tell us about the magical Egyptian Sephiroth?
Sephiroth, yes.
Sephiroth.
The Egyptians were very good at secrets. I don't know about you, but if I have a secret, man, I really have to put a lot of effort into making sure it's a secret. Now, I can do it, but I notice that almost all secrets get out. You know, people just love to jab. Now, or jabber, I should say. Now,
well, you know, my son, when he was a little boy, couldn't keep a secret. He could not hold it in. I remember one time him telling my husband, we'd gotten him, my husband, a flashlight for Father's Day, and I heard him telling my husband, he goes, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you're getting a flashlight for your Father's Day." He was terrible that way. He couldn't keep his mouth shut about anything.
It's human to want to tell. But think that the Egyptians held how they built those pyramids a secret. And there's tons of writing. They write everything for 3,000 years. Not a peep. Not a peep on their mummification. And I believe that the biggest secret was the Sephiroth. And the Sephiroth is part of the tree of life, which we all associate with the Jewish tradition in the Kabbalah and the tree of life. However, I propose, and this is a theory here, that when Moses left Egypt, recall that he was raised as a Pharaoh's son.
Right.
And a Pharaoh's son has access to all of the temples, all of the secrets of the secrets. And I have a theory, is that I believe that Moses' full name would have been Tutmosis.
Tutmosis?
Tutmosis.
Okay.
And Akhenaten had a brother, Tutmosis, which would mean son of Thoth, because the pharaohs and the pharaoh's family would have one of the gods in their name as a rule. And of course, if he's going to be with the Jewish people, he's going to drop the Thoth part and just become Moses. And in my theory, his father would have been Akhenaten.
Akhenaten.
No, his brother, excuse me, would have been Akhenaten.
Akhenaten.
And Akhenaten was the heretic pharaoh. He was the one that denounced the whole pantheon of the gods and believed in the one God. And I like to think of it this way. Think of all the energy that there is. Every energy that could possibly exist is God. And so Moses' God, Yahweh, would have been like white light, or all the energy that is.
Oh, okay.
And imagine it going through a prism, and it breaks out into these beautiful rainbow colors. So then you'd have Isis kind of representing the energy of pink, perhaps Thoth representing the energy of blue, Horus representing the energy of yellow. So in essence, the Sephiroth was the full pantheon of all the higher energies, of all the gods, the higher, most benevolent, most beautiful energies that we can barely even imagine that exists. And that's their pantheon of gods. So I kind of think it's kind of healthy to have us view God as all that is, and also that God can break down like a fractal into many attributes that we can maybe copy in bite-sized pieces. So here you got Akhenaten, and he's introducing to Egypt. His life goal is to introduce the one, that all the energies of divinity can combine into one. And clearly he fails, because when he dies, they, tear down his images and pyramids and thoughts, da-da-da. But I believe his brother would have been Moses, or Tutmosis. Mm-hmm. And think of it from Akhenaten's point of view. He's got this brother they took in from the wrong side of the streets, if you will, gave him everything, and now he's humiliating him. If you look in the Bible and see the things they were doing, not just Moses, but the priests, they were doing things that we would call miracles or wouldn't understand today, but I think if we learn more, we'll understand that they were doing them with quantum physics. And so you have the problem of Moses taking the slaves of the Israelites, and from the Egyptian point of view, that's like taking their wealth and something that's theirs. But I think the bigger thing would not wanting Moses to go, because he has all their secrets.
Oh.
And he also took, I believe, King Solomon's the Ark of the Covenant, because prior to Akhenaten, they talk about the pharaohs having some device that could part the waters. So anyway, perhaps another theory there. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, they did not want Moses to go. And in the final, if you will, wizard's duel between Moses and the priests, of course, Yahweh comes in and kills the oldest son. The oldest son of Akhenaten would have been King Tut, who died at a very young age as a young boy.
Oh, yeah, King Tut.
Yes. And so my thought being that, it's in my theory that Akhenaten, I would imagine, would hated his brother Moses, and yet Moses saved him, because Moses took Akhenaten's idea about the one God. Yahweh is very much similar to Akhenaten's idea of a God, and he did spread it to the world.
And they didn't want him to.
Yeah. So anyway,
okay.
But back to the Sephiroth. The idea is that they had symbols and gods, and they literally had shapes that they converted to sounds. And I have on my website, Jill's Wings of Light, a class on ancient Egypt, and I translated them in the ancient ways into sounds. So kind of like sound codes for each one of the Sephiroth on the Jewish tree of life, the Egyptian tree of life, whatever you want to call it. And it's just taking all of the virtue we could ever have and dividing it just into little pots, and each Sephiroth would be a pot. And the idea was that when you meditated upon the symbols or heard the shapes, that it's kind of like you started opening up to the divine, to channels that were once cut off. And I think it's a very powerful secret, because you figure they have a temple of Isis, they have a temple of Horus, a temple of this and that, but the Sephiroth was uniting it together in a whole, and kind of bringing together all the attributes of God. And that's why I think it's such a really powerful ancient Egyptian secret.
Oh. Well, now we're going to know, guys. Were the Egyptians serious about magic words?
Yes. I remember, the cartoons like Open Sesame and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And now we look back and think, oh, how silly. But also think to the snake charmers. And what are they doing to control that snake? Well, it's sound. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some sort of a music. They do that in India, and it's some sort of a certain
correct
musical instrument that they play.
And frequency and rhythm, the whole thing, yeah.
And I think that they even use cobras,
yes,
which are just about one of the deadliest snakes there are, you know.
Yes. So this is the kind of things that were going on in the priesthood. They would look at the world as quantum physics, only of course not using that word. But they would look at everything can be broken down into smaller parts, all energies. So this table's really vibrating energy. Mm-hmm. And so when you get down to small packets of energy, it's manageable. And one of the most powerful ones would be sound. Your voice, magic words. Also food, fragrance, things that you look at, certain patterns that would mirror patterns, healthy patterns found in nature. And so they would, like you're mixing a spell or a soup or a recipe, if you had heart issues, they would be studying which sounds massaged and healed and kind of restored the heart. Ah will vibrate here, whereas E will vibrate here. So they would have great care and study and have like sounds or consonants and vowels that would be used medically in different places or for different purposes. And then also which frequency. And there's something called resonance, which is science. So let's say you have a violin here and a violin here. You play A here, this A sounds. It's like seeming magic. It's like the energy just seems to invisibly transfer, and here it goes over here. So a singer sings a very high note, and there you have that little crystal glass. It doesn't break unless it's the same pitch or frequency of the crystal.
Oh, okay.
And if it's the correct frequency, energy transfers like in the violin. You get too much, boom, it shatters. Think that we blast kidney stones with sound.
Oh.
So they're using sound to build things up and to take unwanted, such as blockages in your body, away. And they also valued clairvoyance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so they would have clairvoyance in, let's say, one generation, but then they would remember famous clairvoyance and bring their work forward. So people like Donna Eden today can look at you and not only see your aura, but she can see colors of your body. Sherry,
You just saw mine, didn't you?
Yes.
I could tell by the expression on your face at that one moment.
Yes, that's correct. And Sherry Edwards can listen to it. And I've written a book on her called Secret Sounds, Ultimate Healing. But she can hear what your diagnosis is, because she can hear the sounds of your body rebuilding and trying to repair. And so they would know then, with somebody like Donna Eden, which sounds, which foods, which fragrances, which shapes, which objects, which eye of newt, whatever thing would restore harmony and color into, let's say, the heart. And that becomes magic and magic words. And they really had a thing for vowels, and science is confirming all kinds of really interesting things about vowel sounds. And if you think of some sine waves, where the sine waves interlap, if you have two of them, you get like a 0 point energy and things can suspend and different things go on, different restoration things happen in the body. They had special vowel chants, not just ancient Egypt, China, India, Greece, all of them, that they would use kind of like the Sephiroth of hitting all the composite energy in the body and healing them. So they were very, very serious about their magic or their magic words. And they would have to apply quantity. And you'd have to say it right. Like, for example, one word that they used to take like a little garden snake away, as opposed to a cobra, was seben. And
Seben?
Seben. But it didn't work if you said saben. It was seben.
Okay, so it had to be pronounced a certain way with
Correct.
a certain amount of energy.
And a certain emphasis on a syllable, pitch,
Oh, yeah.
rhythm. And also the magician. Did he believe and think that if we take a little fake pill, we have a better chance of getting better if we believe that pill will make us better? I mean, there's really something in the power of belief. So there was something in the consciousness, the belief, the power of the magician, and his feelings also, of course, would add to this stew of magic or quantum physics.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, what was the Hermes Trismegistus, emerald tablet, all about? Turning gold into stone?
Yeah. Hermes Trismegistus, he's in the Bible. He's in the Druid lore. He's known as Thoth in the Egyptian. He's actually known in the ancient world.
Mm-hmm. So who was he known as in the Bible? Hermes?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Hermes in Greece
Uh-huh.
as well. But the emerald tablet was some of his magic, or quantum physics, if you will. And it's the ancient idea of turning stone to gold.
Oh,
And
okay.
even Isaac Newton was fascinated with that. It was the goal of alchemists for many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea, when you do it, because there's books on it, and it has been translated now, and I have a friend who says he did it, although I didn't witness that, but it took my friend many months he said he did it and got a little tiny gram of gold. But anyway, the point being, if the Egyptians wanted gold, you go conquer a nation and you get more than you can imagine. You steal theirs. Mm-hmm. That's much easier than getting a So the point was not to get rich.
Oh, okay.
The point of the emerald tablet in turning stone to gold is to take gross matter and refine it.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Again, remember, the Egyptians are a country that believes their power is based on their spiritual purity, their knowledge, their prowess, their enlightenment, though they wouldn't use that word. So they had different techniques, and I'll explain one, but of taking negative emotions and turning them into virtues, or the idea is in every way, take a diseased liver and restoring it to health. These are the kind of things that is involved in their emerald tablet. It's not just stone to gold, although it is that. It's the process of purification. And one of their healing techniques in the temples regarding this was just to imagine that all the energy in your body is one of the elements. So we're just doing imagination. So you, or listeners, can just right now just kind of think, where in your body do you feel air? Just imagination. It's just, where would you imagine it? And then, is it polluted, stagnant, stuck, sick, pristine, fresh? What is it?
Well, it feels pretty good. You know,
Okay.
I was kind of feeling it in the lower part of my lungs, and it felt clean.
Okay, and then just imagine it perfect.
Perfect.
And just go right through the top. Oh, toes to your head, perfect.
Oh, you know, there's one little trick that I know. If you do deep breathing for a certain for a certain amount of time, just really deep inhales and exhales, and you visualize that you're taking it in through the area between your eyebrows, what's known as the third eye. After you're finished, you'll feel extremely energized, you know, like way more normally than you usually feel. It's pretty interesting, you know, that because you're visualizing it,
Right.
where it's going in. I'm not sure how to explain how that could happen or anything, but
Well, I would think that the Egyptians would think that your imagination is a tool, not child's play.
mm-hmm.
And that when you think and when you feel something, you're actually creating an energy. Jesus said, as a man thinketh, so is he.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying that every part of you, it's your body, it's your thoughts, your feelings, your intent, your subconscious, that which you don't know about yourself, all of this is you. And so when you imagine you, and it's all like vibrations and it's alterable. That's the beauty of quantum physics, that's the beauty of magic, is that you can take deep-seated fears and lift them up, for example, because it's vibratory and the energy mixes it this soft, subtle way. And so then like in this exercise, they would say, then where's the water in your body? And then you'll feel where it is in your imagination, and that's perfect. And then you feel how healthy it is, and then you feel healthy, pure water. And then you spread it all over, and then you do air and water and earth. And it's one of their meditation techniques for health, much like a Reiki or an acupuncture treatment, this little exercise right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun. Okay, tell us about healing in ancient, healthcare in ancient Egypt.
Alrighty. You know you got good health care when your enemies tout your success. If you look at the Hittites, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Greeks, everyone in the ancient world that had money and was privileged, if they were sick, they went to Egypt. So just what were they doing? Some of it is in the papyri. They had some things akin to Matson's, and they did some like setting bones. They did some major, surgery, if you will, something like that.
Like an orthopedic surgeon?
Somewhat, yes. But they had a triage. So if you came in, you would be seen by a priest, a magician who's really, think of quantum physics, think of going to the acupuncturist or a massage therapist or a chiropractor. So that's kind of what subtle energy management is, what the magician is doing. And then you had a physician. The first thing they would do is to decide whether you went into hospice, whether you should go into care. They didn't have any emergency rooms, so if you had a big accident and they didn't feel you would live long enough for their treatment to work, they just like let you go? Yeah, send you to hospice, you don't get medical care.
Except they probably had another name for it. They probably didn't call it hospice.
That's correct. That's correct. And then because you had to have enough quantity, because it's like they're giving you dosage in homeopathy. They're giving you doses in smaller quantities. And, well, here's an example. I read about this in the papyri. A cure for a broken skull is to sleep with an ostrich egg. One of the cures. They would give you about a dozen cures. Mm-hmm. And I know, I saw the look on your face, and that's what I thought. I was thinking, oh, maybe these guys are nuts. But then I wrote this book on Sherry Edwards, who can hear sounds in volumes below our hearing range. Her ears are somewhat deformed, not like ours. And she hears sounds out of shapes, even 2D shapes. She hears sounds of everything. And indeed, the sound of an ostrich egg, which is very similar to the shape of your skull, shapes emulate sounds. And today you can go to a bone doctor and some will give you a little box that's simply the frequency of a healthy bone, and you listen to it and you take then half the time of healing that bone. Through resonance with the two violins, you're creating the frequency of a healthy bone, and then, quote unquote, you hear it and your bones absorb that frequency and it heals your bones. So here you have the frequency of this ostrich egg, which is very similar to that of a healthy skull, and through resonance you slowly ingest healing frequencies. So, and here's another technique they had. It was called their call buddy. And they believed that all of us have an equal and opposite soul, subtle energy, something. They had different words. So we have our soul and then an opposite soul. Mm-hmm. It's called quantum entanglement. It's been proved by science with that Hadron accelerator. It's mm-hmm. not even a theory anymore. We do have an opposite energy. And what they would say is that sometimes the root cause isn't necessarily in this body. It's energy you're connected to. So they would heal energy you're connected to. They even had music for healing your ka body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, Is this anything like psychic parasites or anything like that?
I really don't know, because I don't know how someone exactly defines that. I don't think so, because I think it's your own energy.
It's your own energy?
And I had a girlfriend who was fabulous craniosacral, and we would always give each other energy treatment. Sometimes we'd be able to fix a problem, but it didn't last.
Oh.
And so we just started experimenting, like doing Reiki on an imaginary car body. We would focus on it, intent, and bring it in, kind of like they say energy is, sometimes energy happens only if the observer is present. So we imagine that we have the car body or an imaginary opposite energy, and when we would do Reiki on that, and oftentimes we would fix it for good. So that was a personal experience with craniosacral and Reiki.
Now, did you call this Craw body or
Ka.
Ka body? Okay.
Yeah, so energy workers, man, there's a storehouse of fabulous techniques.
Yeah, it's like one time we had a Reiki therapist come to one of our vegetarian society dinners, and I volunteered to have her demonstrate on me, and she asked me if I had any pain, and I knew I needed an appointment with a chiropractor. I could tell it wasn't going to go away by itself. And she asked me if I had any pain anywhere, and I said yes, in the left side of my neck and my left shoulder. So she just held her hands on my neck and shoulder for a certain amount of minutes. I don't remember how many it was. And I didn't notice anything that evening, but the next morning when I woke up, I wound up not having to go to the chiropractor because the Reiki energy had taken care of the adjustment. Now a lot of people probably don't think that's possible, that something that appears to be so simple could do that, but
I believe some cancer centers and hospitals are including Reiki practitioners.
Yeah, they are. Even the Chautauqua County Hospice, I think they have somebody that does Reiki that they can get to come and visit the patients, like if they're agitated or something.
And here's why I'm excited about the secrets of ancient Egypt. The idea with Reiki is that you learn techniques, and then they show you like what do they call it, an attunement. And it's on a piece of paper, it's a shape. Much like the Sephiroth have shapes. It's the exact same idea. And they believe that when you get this attunement, that you open up the chakras in your hand. It's kind of like looking at the attunement, it gives you energy to open up an ancient portal or ancient connection you once had, and then you now channel white light out of your hand, and that is what is called Reiki. That's
okay.
Reiki. And what I learned from the Egyptian temples was that, like, for example, in the Temple of Isis, when they did massage, they would always sing. They would just subconsciously sing, and it's like they tune into your body and they sing the tones along with the massage, frequencies that your body needs. And they had a little bit like advanced Reiki or Reiki up a step or something, in which instead of having white light coming out of your hands, they'd have like red, yellow, orange. They would have colors out of your fingers.
Wow.
And so they did like an attunement up from what we know of Reiki. And the idea is, let's say you have a heart issue and you've got a blockage, and you have energy that's, energy vibrates. So you can count its cycle per second and match it to, let's say, a musical note or a color. Both is done mathematically. So let's say you have way too much pink energy here. It's blocked.
Okay.
So when you give white light, of course that's very healing, because health would be equated to white light, or all that is. But this area, you're giving a little bit of dosage of red, and it has too much red. So kind of like a refined technique for Reiki would to give all the colors then except red, which is something that we don't do today, but the Egyptians did in the Temple of Isis. They would use the color rays. So I just think it has a storehouse of really exciting things. They used sound patterns like the solfeggio tones. I have a CD, Paint Your Soul, in which I have these solfeggio tones. And you can take Carillion photography, and I have that in one of my books, Ancient Sounds, Modern Healing, Carillion photography of people just listening to this set of tones. And it lights up your aura with white light, which is very healing. And so they would use the number patterns that create those tones. You would listen to those tones. You could put those tones in colors. And then they would pass it down generation and generation, like just certain tonal patterns for healing. You could even use that in your voice, in chanting and incantation.
Oh.
And we can confirm it today with Carillion photography.
What about the meditation practices they used in ancient Egypt?
Well, they have so many. We could go forever and ever and ever. But let me talk about one. When you look at pictures of Isis or Horus or some of the gods, they have these colored balls on their head, above their head.
Right.
It's like a halo
Right.
above their head.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes they're adorned with, a cobra or something. And they are chakras with their head. My understanding is they believed that we kind of like evolved into matter, and that, all coming from God ultimately. And so now we're in this little component called a human, and that when we were closer to God, that we would have more light in our bodies. Think of your Disney movies with the fairy godmother, kind of very translucent kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that when you were more connected, had more consciousness, your chakras, which are where you take in energy, would be bigger, like maybe the size of a grapefruit or an orange, whereas now they're about the size of an LED light if we're healthy.
Oh.
And so they would do exercises with imagination, like we did earlier, with the emerald tablet, with various chakras, taking them from little tiny bits of light to balls of light. And one of their techniques was to work with the chakra above their head. And through meditation, just imagining it, feeling it, and then they would, of course, have tones and shapes and colors and things that people could clairvoyantly see worked, in which they would strengthen these chakras. And then they would imagine them and have them come into their other chakras. So they would say that we're all connected by some type of silver cord, and they would draw down this energy and ingest the light. And I have that in the course. I have an 8-hour course on that on my website, Jill's Wings of Light, called chakra toning or something like chakra attunements.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they would also work with like your back chakras. And then that's one, but there's so many. Like with Horus was like the pharaohs were all Horus, and he was kind of a big picture guy. And one of the techniques they did, I remember, was kind of depicted on Sword in the Stone in a Disney movie.
Oh.
And in the Disney movie, the young King Arthur would imagine being a fish, and he would literally then transfer into a fish body. I mean, they would like leave their body, almost, if you will, and learn the lessons of a fish or learn the lessons of an eagle. And they would do this to such a powerful extent that they could actually imagine so well that they would see from above their head. And you get a different opinion. Like, you don't argue about this land or that land. It's one mountain. You get a bigger picture. And then the other thing they would do with the Horus temple is the Sephiroth, and trying to tie it all in together. It's the big picture. I mean, I could go on. One last one. The pharaoh, every 26 years, had to do like a triathlon, because their idea was he's like a god. So he's got to be physically, mentally, spiritually, he's got to be top dog.
Yeah.
And every 26 years, he had to prove his physical capacity. And he had to do a triathlon in front of a pile of people. Now, if you've got a pharaoh that's 70-something, woo, think of that. So in one of their meditation techniques was to imagine themselves in a very visceral way of being young. So you get in every day, you meditate your skin, your brain, your heart, your lungs, and you remember what it felt like when you were in your youth.
Mm-hmm.
And you just keep like drawing it in and drawing it in and drawing it in to youth in your body. So they had lots.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one thing that I do believe is possible. You know, I really do. Explain Egyptian feng shui.
Okay. People credit feng shui with China, and they have great stuff. But feng shui is also called Vastashusta in Hindu tradition. Vastashusta.
Vastashusta.
Yeah, they have their own feng shui, as well as Greece, Samaria, all the ancient globe did it. And in essence, the idea was that you want to get a quantity of healing energy, of white light, of patterns found in nature. Basically, God made nature. And so his beauty and perfection, how it feels good to be in the woods, is what they would create in their buildings.
Oh.
And they had a different way of looking at mathematics and just looking at nature than we do today. They looked at it in terms of proportions, you know, measuring it, shapes, and this is called sacred geometry. Almost all sacred geometry is some shape coming from nature, either quantum physics or go out in nature and look at it. And what number patterns or energies did God like when he made nature? And they would boil them down to numbers, and then they would put that in their temples, in their pyramids. You'll find the pyramids will match temples from earth to moon, earth to sun. They'll incorporate all kinds of numbers that you wonder how could they know about. But in their personal homes, they would take, again, like the Fibonacci numbers, they would rearrange the rooms so that all the dimensions, all the furnitures, all the chairs were in the Fibonacci numbers or were harmonious. If you take an octave, you simply double it. So that if you're going to build a house to the head of the household, you know, the height might be exactly double his head, you know, so it's in harmony with him. And so they would do those types of things. They would also do paper layouts of their house. And so we could do that today for decorating a room and then cut out the shapes of the furniture. And if you move it, you'll find it feels different. Think if you move the furniture a lot in your room, it feels different. So they would do it in small ways. And then they would take shapes found in nature, sacred geometry, and they'd put them on the backs of things. So underneath your rugs, you could have 5-pointed stars, 6-pointed star, Vesica Pisces. You could find all these nature frequencies that are healing, put them behind your pictures, incorporate them in dimensions. And the idea is that you make a machine to radiate healthy energy. No willpower.
A machine.
No willpower. Just go in there and heal.
Yeah, I've heard some things about feng shui, probably not necessarily Egyptian, but damp rooms in the house, like the kitchen and the bathroom. You could find something that wasn't harmonious, something about them being damp or something. I know there was this one thing that I read somewhere about you should, when you flush the toilet, it should be closed, you know, so that you don't get stuff coming up that you're flushing down, coming up into the room and so forth.
Or just taking energy away.
Or taking energy away, like getting sucked down into the toilet.
Or if you have like a bathroom that's too wet, think of water, and so each room you might want to balance with all of the elements. This would be going into China. So you could put in earth, you could put in other frequencies to make sure every room was in balance. Or another idea is, you could have rooms for different purposes. A room to calm down, a room to get energy, a room a water room or a dry room, and you could actually use your rooms like little homeopathic medicines. There's many, many ways to do it. But I just love the idea that the Egyptians would just do a layout, and they had these simple ways, and then they would put all these shapes underneath to just bring in Mother Earth and nature into your house.
Sounds nice.
Making sure it's not a GMO house.
Yeah, yeah. I know there's a lot of talk about decluttering your house, people's decluttering their houses these days, and I think that probably has a lot to do with feng shui too, you know, having your house organized and so forth.
The idea is that you want energy to flow through your house, and so it gets stuck in closets and piles of crap, and just like if you get stuck in an artery or vein, that could be very seriously damaging to your health. So they would feel like the place that you're in creates subtle energy that impacts you. So they would clear all that out, and sometimes they'll do that with sound, like a singing bowl, for example. They'll go in and they'll play it in the closets and so forth, and then they'll just imagine the flow of energy through their house, and they'll rearrange the furniture so that there's not sticky areas or dead areas in your house, so that it's all kind of like a very healthy young body in which energy flows.
Okay. Now, did the ancient Egyptians use sound to lift rocks?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I believe they did. As well as the Chinese. It's written about in the Aztecs, the Incans, and pretty much many of the societies in the globe. They all talk about it. And I saw a couple methods, and I still have yet to understand some of them, but I did understand one. And this is the idea. Again, think of the crystal glass and the soprano singer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so she sings the high note, but not any note. It's got to be the note of the glass. So what they would do is that you would get a bunch of musicians, and this is an ancient idea, is this, that it was not just a sound in its frequency or musical element, but the angle at which the music was played. So they would be concerned about where your musicians stood and how many of them there were for power. So me singing to you in this direction gives you a slightly different healing than me singing at you from an angle. The mathematics of quantum physics would be a little different. So they would map out where the people, which then they would carefully select the instruments. Everything's going to be tuned to the frequency of the rock. One way in which they would do it is you'd put your hand over the stone, and through resonance, as you sing, energy is going, like you have these two violins. So if I'm playing an A on this violin, this A sounds. Now if I were to play this A sounds. If I play, so you could keep playing these A's and kind of like building the A energy, if you will, or the energy of that musical note. So they're going to have all these sounds come in and lift the rock, and then they would dig a little hole underneath so that they would aim it from a variety of angles underneath the rock, so that the sound would lift it up, and in essence they would resonate it so that it became like it anti-gravity. And I think there's coral castles in Florida, which I believe some man suggested that he did the same thing, Edward Leedscam. And
with coral castles?
Yeah, with huge, tons, very heavy things, in which, again, they're using sound and resonance and vibrating at its composite energy. Like right before that rock, that crystal glass shatters, it would get light, would be the idea, and that's when they would move it. One idea. They described others that I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, I've heard, I think I read somewhere, and I think it might have been one of the books that I read about Edgar Cayce. He might have said that maybe he didn't know how they were doing it, but he said that they levitated the rocks.
It's
somehow.
exactly what I'm telling you.
Yeah,
Same thing, that
yeah.
the word levitate, anti-gravity, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he said that something about on the lost continent of Atlantis before it sunk, there were a lot of things that people were able to do that were lost, and one of them, you know how in the old cartoons we used to see when we were kids, where if the cartoon was Middle Eastern themed, they'd be riding through the air on carpets, you know, like magic carpets and things. And he said that was actually something that actually they were able to do.
Yeah, and I've read about those. And here's what I've read, or understand about them, is that way back in time, that the magnetic energies, there's currents on the Earth due to the molten rock, and that in our history they would have been a lot stronger, and they've dissipated. So we would have these currents, and you see that you've seen perhaps drawings, or you can get on the internet and look at drawings where people will do. They'll align the different pyramids on the Earth, and they make a certain shape on the Earth, and these would also be reflective of what they call ley lines or energy currents, earth currents. NASA even works with them because sometimes the different ley lines will accompany waterways and so forth. And in fact, it will also encompass underground waterways, different ways that energy flows. And so my understanding was that you would have these magnetic lines that perhaps were stronger on a full moon. You know, just as the moon affects the tides, it would affect the underwater ways. It might affect the strength of these currents. And then the idea is that, you know, the carpets kind of ride those energies. And that would be the inception, I think, of a witch.
Oh,
you know, a broomstick for steering.
Oh, yeah, riding up in the sky on a broomstick. Yeah, yeah. You hear? Well, those ideas must have come from someplace, you know. But yeah, it's really an interesting subject. Yeah, I do know, like with chanting and so forth, you know, it changes the way that you feel. And in fact, like the Hindus, they chant the names of people who were saints. And they say that they call it the holy repetition of syllables, and that if you chant the name of somebody who's a saint or an enlightened being, like over and over again for a certain length of time, and you do it every day and everything, it draws you closer to living in the same state of consciousness. That
actually becoming that. Think of the violin again, only we got these two violins, and we want to resonate with it so that we can receive. But instead of a violin, we'll say we have an enlightened being. You know, let's say Jesus. Okay, Jesus is one violin, and we're the other violin. So if we can sing Jesus' song, or if we can sing his name, or if we have a way to resonate with him, it's just like the violin. We're going to start to absorb that energy. And again, the idea of the Sephiroth is, you know, many gods that might have attributes of God. So the Hindus had many gods, so they're going to, like, think of a god of pink, or a god of orange or yellow, or a god of grace, a god of glory, a god of mercy. And so they're going to sing these chants to download their groceries of energy to become God-like. And then they compacted that with an idea of group thought. Think like if you're with a bunch of sports people, it's easy to think in terms of being an athlete is good. You're with nerds, it's easy to get into, well, the good people are the smart ones. And so likewise with these chants, it's like energy coagulates or forms a group. And so let's say we're singing in the Hindu tradition, we're singing about divine bliss or some good quality, some virtue we'd all love. And everybody who sings it and feels that, it's like adds to this group consciousness. So even though that was thousands of years ago, that divine, beautiful feeling, it's like it continues. So as you sing into it, and it makes it even better, and then your children sing into it, and then it's even bigger. And so we tap into a higher consciousness. And when we do that, we absorb frequency. People think the only thing that becomes them is their food, but it's not. You absorb sound, that's a fact. It changes your liver, your body, your thoughts, your feelings. And it's the same with fragrance and sight, and we absorb.
Yeah, certain smells, you know, they just lift you right up, don't they? You know,
Absolutely.
you're smelling your favorite foods. So.
Yes, or even they've done studies, and they, of course, good old USA, we have the studies of which fragrances make people buy more.
Oh. Oh.
So there, and sometimes in malls they'll release certain scents to put people in a mood of prosperity.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being in a mood of prosperity, but sometimes I think you can buy too much stuff. Yeah. So, okay, we're down to a little under 2 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like the viewing audience to know?
Well,
today?
I would just say to be conscious of the fact that we're not separate. We think we're a container, we're a body. And yet, really, I think we're energy using this body at this moment, which is very much us, in the fact that we reflect back and forth, but that, you know, who we're with, what we surround ourselves with when we're in nature. Think of being in a concrete building versus a log cabin, and you know how nature feels better, and that what feels good is good for you, and to trust your feelings and your instincts, and think of yourself more in terms of an energy body, and then it kind of puts you more in line with the ancient power in Egypt that you know, you're primarily like a spiritual body, a soul, and that animates everything else, and it's very fluid and changeable, and that's beautiful because you can upgrade yourself. And I guess that's one of the things I learned from studying about ancient Egypt.
Well, this has been really interesting. You're so knowledgeable, it blows me away, you know.
So kind.
But it's very, very interesting, and I'm going to be thinking about these things a lot more from now on. And thank you for coming on, and I'll see the rest of you in the viewing audience on the next episode in a couple of weeks.